Hey everyone, it's Argonath here and welcome to my very first video. Today we're going to look at the reality of lockdowns in New Zealand. Currently we are in partial lockdowns in various cities in New Zealand, but our main city, Auckland, which has over 1 million people in it, New Zealand only has 5 million people total, is currently in level 4, which is the strictest lockdown. Basically, you're restricted to your home. You can only go out for a bit of exercise and go and do your shopping, otherwise stay at home basically. So how do we get to this particular situation? So basically Auckland has already been in level 4 lockdown for the last 2.5 weeks already, and now it's going for another week. And in that time, there's only been other cases in Wellington, which is another one of the major cities in New Zealand, and there hasn't been any cases in any other cities. But all places outside of Auckland has to remain in level 2 because the government can't protect the border between Auckland and the rest of the country. And so basically, we're all stuck in some form of restriction, but at least in level 2, we're not completely locked down. Although you have to wear masks, when you can't be distant from anyone, need to wear masks inside when you're doing shopping and so on. So that is a bit of a problem for a lot of people. But we do it to not pass on the virus if we happen to get it. But it's only in Auckland and Wellington. There isn't anywhere else, which is a real bummer for the rest of the country. So basically we're up to 955 cases in the current outbreak, if you haven't been following what's going on in New Zealand, which is not huge compared to a lot of other countries, but considering we had a year of no cases at all, that's pretty big for us in New Zealand. And the reason why we have to go into lockdown is because we haven't got enough people vaccinated, which is a real problem. So currently the numbers keep kind of rumbling along. About another 50 cases were expected in the coming days due to a number of close contacts of identified cases. So basically, as soon as one person gets it, when they're isolating with their family, all the rest of that family get it as well because of the nature of the Delta variant. But all is not lost. The R value, which is the reproduction rate, at the start of the outbreak was about 6 or higher, but now we've got it down to below 1 due to the restriction, so that has worked. But it is producing some major effects on our economy and so on. And this is all down to the government's lack of action in getting the population vaccinated. So let's have a look at how it is affecting some of our businesses and so on. So what was meant to be a short, sharp 3-day lockdown is now moving into its 4th week. Financial support is limited and will not be enough to stop businesses going to the wall, Retail NZ Chief Executive Greg Harford said. So basically, with businesses being locked down in Auckland, if you're not an essential business, you can't open, which means you can't earn any money. Now, there is a government wage subsidy scheme, which will pay for the wages of your workers, but it doesn't cover things like your business costs, that sort of thing. You still got to pay rent, still got outgoings that you need to do. There is some funds that businesses can apply for that as well, but it's very limited. And so, when you're locked down for 4 weeks, that has a huge implication on your business, right? So basically, we're down to this. Auckland cannot afford to stay in alert level 4. We are bleeding tens of millions of dollars each week, but there are social and personal impacts negatively impacting people's well-being, confidence, and willingness to comply with this health first approach. Basically, all of these people that are providing advice to the government, they're all people that are academics and so on. Who pays their wages? The government. Where does the government get the money from? The taxpayers, right? People that work, people that do business, right? So these people that are advising the government, they're taking a health first approach. Awesome, you're going to reduce deaths and that kind of thing, but they don't take into any account how it affects people socially and economically and physically when your businesses are being killed because they can't open and they can't survive. So there has to be, so he carries on, there has to be a better balance to get us to the sick bay and back to health. Physically, socially and economically, we need a different response to live with COVID as safely as possible without killing our livelihoods and our lifestyle. All right, so currently in the last, I think, 4 weeks of lockdown, the government spent $1.8 billion just on the wage subsidy alone. $1.8 billion, right? Sure, that keeps people wages going, they can pay for stuff. Where is that money coming from? Well, it's coming from borrowing or printing money, basically, and the chickens will come home to roost later on at some point. All right, so here we go. So as a raw estimate, the economic hit to GDP every day in level 4 is costing Auckland about 100 million in lost economic activity. All right. So those businesses that are essential businesses, some of the big stores like the supermarkets and things like that, petrol stations and so on, they're raking in the money, whereas all the little shops, little businesses, mum and dad businesses, they're getting nothing. So that is a real problem if we don't get out of lockdown as fast as possible. So here's some things from our amazing economists. So economists now view much of the suppressed activity as displaced rather than lost, based on the sharp V-shaped recovery New Zealand experienced last year. So what happened last year is that after the lockdown, obviously we went into a major economic meltdown because no shops were open. And then once shops opened up again, businesses kind of bounced back again. Spending was up again. All right, so that was for the first one. So for example, Kiwibank chief economist Jared Kerr, who's probably on an amazing $1 million wage or plus, is picking New Zealand's third quarter GDP will plunge by 7%, but will bounce back sharply. Recent experience tells us that activity rebounds rapidly when lockdowns are lifted. Only problem with that is, Jared Kerr, if your business doesn't survive till lockdown is lifted, it doesn't really help you too much, does it? Right, so how many businesses are going to the wall in that time to reap the benefit of the bounce back? Probably a lot of the big chains, the big corporations, they'll be actually raking in the cash, whereas a lot of businesses might also have folded by then. So we need to do something fast, all right? And as I said, our main problem is that we just don't have enough people vaccinated, which is a huge problem in New Zealand. I think from up to about a month ago, New Zealand was at the bottom of the OECD countries in terms of vaccinations. So that is going to be a whole project. Here we go. So here's that statistic I see. I see 1.8. I wasn't quite correct. It's actually 1.2. So for the whole country at level 4, the wage subsidy came in at about 1.2 billion for the first fortnight, not a month. Oh my God. So for the first fortnight, 1.2 billion and about $500 million for the resurgent support payment. So that's the payment that goes to businesses to help them to keep going. So 1.2 billion for employees, only $500 million for resurgent support for keeping businesses alive. Amazing. All right. So that suggests that Auckland's extended level 4 lockdown could cost the government more than $300 million a week, which will be loaded onto New Zealand's long-term debt. Right? Who has to pay the debt back? Taxpayers. There's nowhere else to get money from. It has to be paid by taxpayers at some point in the future. That's not my generation. I'm of the older generation. But my kids and all the other younger generations to come, they're going to be paying for all of this. Right, so why is it so bad in terms of vaccination rate in New Zealand? I'll come to where we are in a minute. So here's an article from the 21st of July. So I'm recording this as of the 13th of September. So on 25th of July, the opposition party raised some questions about our vaccine rate. So let's have a look at what was said. So the government's first purchase order for the Pfizer vaccine compromised just 54,600 doses and was made in late January, so that would have been 2021, I believe. Despite a commitment from the Recovery Minister Chris Hipkins that New Zealand will be at the front of the queue for jabs. So if we're at the front of the queue for jabs, but we only order 54,600 doses for 5 million people, remember you need 2 doses, so you actually need 10 million over 10 million doses. That doesn't sound like we're at the front of the queue, Chris Hipkins, right? So in October, the government signed an advance pre-purchase agreement for 1.5 million doses for the Pfizer vaccine. Originally the Pfizer vaccine was given approval by MedSafe in New Zealand, and we also put in orders for other vaccines, but then it was decided that we're just going to do Pfizer for everyone, I guess to keep things simple or something. But if we're supposed to be at the front of the queue, you don't order 54,600 doses. That's just ridiculous. You just put in an order in for as much as you can, and then just let them work out when they can deliver it. It's just ridiculous. Alright, so it requires 2 Pfizer doses to be fully vaccinated, so our 65,500 doses equates to enough vaccines for 32,000 people, as we said. So, pretty bad, really. Okay, so let's have a look. So there's another article here. So could the vaccine rollout have been a bit quicker? So this was dated August the 25th. So in-depth report from stuff.co.nz by Nikki MacDonald, who does a really good job here. So until the delivery of 370,000 doses of the Pfizer vaccine in mid-July, so that's 2021, the biggest issue holding back of the rollout was a shortage of vaccines. This should be no surprise. Documents dated back to December 2020 warned that global demand would limit vaccine supply. So we obviously didn't order enough when we should have. Right, so you can see vaccine doses available kind of went up as we got some in, then it started going down heavily. In July we got down to just 20,000 doses, and then it's kind of gone back up again in August. So New Zealand was late to secure vaccine deals. The United States ordered 100 million Pfizer doses in July 2020 and got its first deliveries that December. New Zealand, meanwhile, made its first pre-purchase agreement in October 2020. October 2020, right? And that was only for 1.5 million doses. That is so crap, right? From what I've heard from other news organisations is that New Zealand wanted to wait so they didn't have to pay enough. Well, you're paying for it now, New Zealand government, because it's costing the economy major amounts of money being in lockdown. So it goes on to say, so yeah, supplies then arrived in dribbles, hampering the rollout. Chris Hipkins, the response minister, told select health committees this week that the government regularly asked Pfizer for faster deliveries, but was not given the option of paying more to speed the process. Well, did you ask them? Right? Rather than just say, oh, we weren't given the option, did you ask them? Did you say, we'll pay even extra? You know, it would have made a massive difference. So we keep going down. Where was I going to talk about? Here we go. So, however, when supply stopped being limited, the limiting factor, New Zealand's vaccination program was not poised to spring into action because of the poor handling by this government. Right, so both pharmacists and family doctors say they could have ramped up vaccinations earlier, but for excessive red tape. Even now, only 143 of 500 vaccination capable pharmacies and about 300 of 1,000 GP practices are giving the jabs. Right, so remember when this article was written? It was written on the 25th of August. This is now the 13th of September, so not that far away. We still haven't managed to get all our pharmacies doing vaccinations, all our GP practices doing vaccinations. We probably still haven't got to getting everyone done at that point either. So that's really bad. I mean, the government should have done a lot more effort to get that all up and running. Right, so once we got past the supply and storage issues, we should have been ready to go then. Not trying to onboard them now. I think we're a few months behind where we should be. No effing kidding. Right, so let's have a look at New Zealand's vaccine rate compared to the rest of the world. So this is just showing the OECD countries. So generally they're classed as the higher class countries, I guess. Don't mean anything by that if you're in a different country. All right. So where's New Zealand? There we go. There's New Zealand. So this is the total number of people that have received at least one dose. So it's one dose or two doses all lumped together. Okay, and we'll look at how many have actually received both doses in a minute. So for at least one dose, New Zealand has 56.75%. Okay, we're just ahead of countries like Czechia, Estonia, and thankfully Australia. Well, us Kiwis, we love to beat Australia and things, so we are beating them, only by 2% roughly. The Australian Prime Minister has already apologised to the nation for the poor rollout of their vaccine in Australia, but in New Zealand, the government has been extolling their virtues on how great we've been doing in our vaccine rollout. Well, we've been doing really poorly. In fact, I've had my 2 vaccinations, and I encourage everyone to get a vaccination, whether you're in New Zealand or anywhere. It does work. You can just look at the statistics. Yes, there can be side effects, but it's very, very rare. And so I really encourage you to get vaccinated. It will really help you if you ever get COVID. It does help with that. So I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I'm all for vaccinations. I'm just really annoyed at the very poor rollout of the vaccinations by this particular government. So just a couple of more things regarding the business information. So going on about the wage subsidies. So hair salon owner, so just one person, okay, it's just anecdotal, it's one person that the journalist from stuff.co.nz has interviewed, but if it's happening to one person, it's likely happening to other people as well. Right, so hair salon owner Lindsay Erasmus said she is distressed by an unexplained delay receiving wage subsidies that left her unable to pay her staff or herself, and she's trying to run the business. Right, so she's among an unknown number of business owners who believe their subsidies have been delayed for no good reason or declined for reasons that they could not understand. The extent of the unexplained issues remains unclear, with the Ministry of Social Development, who is running the wage subsidies, and the Inland Revenue Department as well. They do delay payments for businesses submitting incorrect information if the numbers don't match up, but it's hard when they don't tell you what it's about. Right, so initially Erasmus had no issues applying for the first round of wage subsidies, which was the August 17th to 31st, 2021. It's just this new round, which is the extra 2 weeks in September. But she had heard nothing from MSD 10 days after applying for the second round of subsidies. Right, so yes, you've applied. If they haven't got back to you saying, hey, there's something wrong, what are you supposed to do? If and how? Right, so MSD, IRD, get your friggin' ass into gear and sort this out. You're putting people's livelihoods at risk. So Erasmus has been unable to pay her 8 staff or herself anything because of the delay. My team is heading into their second week of no money coming in whatsoever. We're struggling financially as we have rent and mortgage commitments to pay. And this is a big thing. As a business owner, I feel massively responsible for my employees, and I feel that I've let them down. My mental health has taken a bit of a dip because of that burden. Most of the girls have got children, including myself. Of course your mental health is going to suffer. Erasmus reached MSD by phone on Friday. It was told by a lovely gentleman that the application was being processed. Oh right, great information there, MSD. I understand, so she's being quite understanding here. I understand that MSD is under huge amounts of pressure to get these subsidies paid. However, I feel that the big corporations get first choice and the small businesses like myself and sole traders are getting shoved to the bottom of the pile. Of course they're getting shoved to the bottom of the pile because they're only interested in looking after their corporation mates. You know, the small businesses are the bread and butter businesses in New Zealand, right? This is really bad. So MSD Services Manager Jason Dwayne responded shortly after 2 p.m. on Monday after being contacted for comment by staff that Lush Hair's application had been waiting to be processed while the ministry worked through verification checks. So it had been waiting to be processed still 10 days after putting it through. Right? If you can't process the applications in time, then friggin' find some workers to help you to do it. Can't be that hard to find some people. There's a lot of people unemployed at the moment if you're an essential business. It has been approved and payment should follow shortly. We apologise for the initial delay. I wonder As soon as the press got involved, they got the application approved. Very fishy, right? They don't want any bad press coming down on them, so they get it through and say, oh, we're very sorry about the initial delay. That just sucks. So I feel very sorry for this business owner, but this is the sort of thing that businesses are putting up with. Not just no money coming in, but the hoops that they have to go through to get wage subsidies for the employees and to keep their businesses afloat. It must be an absolute nightmare. I'm not a business owner, so I don't know what they're going through, but I can imagine that it just must be really, really heartbreaking and very stressful on those particular people. Another thing, so in South Island, there are absolutely no cases at all, so they're not allowed to go down to level 1. They're in level 2, which has certain restrictions. So places like the ski field, obviously we're nearing the end of our winter, so we've got a limited time for the ski fields to make some money before we hit summer, and there's no snow left. So fares are growing at alert level 2 will continue next week, with once this article was done on the 12th of September, so that was yesterday. Continue next week with one business organisation calling the current rules ridiculous and disappointing. So while Christchurch was buzzing with people out and about on the first weekend under level 2 restrictions, Central Business Association Chairwoman Annabelle Turley said extending the level for another week could be terrible for the hospitality and retail sectors because they have restrictions on how many people you can have inside, and you have to wear friggin' masks. So how many people want to go out to a restaurant and then have to wear a mask and talk to people about that? So where do they talk about it? Just down here. So, no, where was it? Here we go. So Stuff was told by staff at several retail businesses at the Colombo Mall that trade was quiet on Saturday morning, but some put that down to shoppers not wanting to wear masks. So obviously, it's anecdotal. There's no, imperative evidence for that, but I think they can probably tell when their business is not carrying on as it normally does. So the longer level 2 went on, this person said the longer businesses will miss out on the daily lunch rush from these employers, and the bigger financial impact will be. Okay, so it's just appalling that due to our poor vaccination rates in New Zealand, we're having to go through this lockdown. It's all we can do, right? We have COVID in New Zealand. If we just allowed it to run rampant, it'll just go for the whole population, and we can't cope. We don't have the medical facilities like other countries, right? Even in Auckland, which has got over 1 million people, I think the ICU units that they have is just running into the kind of 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s for the whole Auckland city, which is over 1 million people in it. So it's just not going to cope if we had COVID through it. So unfortunately, we have to go through this. But a lot of people think that government's doing a great job, but they just don't know what such a poor job it is that they're doing. So anyway, that's my first video, just giving you a reality on what's happening in New Zealand, how it's affecting businesses and so on. I just hope that we can get our vaccinations rate up and we can start to open up. We just can't carry on locking down. We have to get vaccinated. Hopefully the government will see this eventually. You just cannot keep locking up people all the time. People's mental well-being and their businesses are starting to fail. If businesses go under, then employees' jobs will go. So they're not getting any money either. They'll go on the benefit, have to get money from the government, our social security. That's going to cost money, but we've got less people paying tax. So hopefully the government can do that. Anyway, if you liked what you heard, you quite enjoyed it, then please subscribe, hit the like button. Just helps with the YouTube algorithm for people finding out more information. If you have any comments, either bad or good, I'm always happy to read them. I won't ever delete comments unless they're really, really poor or have hate speech or anything. Don't want anything like that. Should just be reasonable. But bad and good comments are most welcome for my first video, and I'll see you after that. So this is me, Aruganath, and I will hopefully catch you in the next recording.